All right. Well, hello and welcome to everybody for joining us. Thanks for making the time in your afternoon if you're here in the U.S. or evening if you're overseas. Always a lot of fun to do these with the Beat the GMAT community. It's fun working with people that have been studying a lot or are pretty intense about it, and want to make sure that this is as valuable as possible for all of you. Before I get started too much, I want to also thank the folks at Beat the GMAT for co-hosting this with us, for giving us the opportunity to work with everyone. I'm Brian. I'm one of the curriculum directors at Veritas Prep, and it's actually kind of an interesting time to be going through one of these. I think next week will be my 10th anniversary of teaching with Veritas Prep, so far longer than anyone should ever study for the GMAT. Hopefully you guys do it in maybe 10 weeks or hopefully less than 10 months, but over 10 years you learn a thing or two, and want to share a lot of those things with you guys today. The theme of our session today will be, statistically speaking, we're going to run through some stats on questions that are in our worldwide question bank. And I don't know if anyone's used that. I don't even know if I can pop up a link, but if you can just Google Veritas Prep Question Bank, or there are links to it all over Beat the GMAT website. It's a bunch of free practice questions, and really the only catch is we collect all the information on it. So every time you answer a question, we get to see how people do on those questions. And what we'll show you then with this is what we've learned about the types of mistakes that people make over and over again on a test like this, and how you can avoid that, how there are strategies to be able to avoid those common trap answers. And so a couple quotes come to mind when we think about that one. This is sort of the classic. Those who can't remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Or as George Bush so eloquently said one time, going for the phrase, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. He got fooled on that one himself. But keep that in mind. There's no shame in making mistakes in practice, on practice tests, in a class, in homework. The big key is that you need to learn from them. So one other quote that isn't up here, but one that I tell my students over and over again is, you can learn a lot more from a few seconds of pain than from a few hours of glory. What that means is, when you make mistakes and it feels like you just got punched in the stomach or you just got tricked or fooled, that's not a bad thing. You can learn a lot from mistakes. It's just make sure that, kind of heeding the advice of Santayana, make sure that you learn from those mistakes, learn from the past, so you don't keep repeating them. So that's our goal today. We're going to go through a handful of questions, some quant, some verbal, and show you, based on the statistics, what kinds of mistakes do people make, and then how can you learn from those mistakes, whether you made them or you've seen others make them, so you can avoid them on test day and get a little bit more ingrained with the way that this test forces you to think. One more kind of general thing before we break down a few questions. This is the way that we look at all of our lessons at Veritas Prep, where we look at the way that the test is constructed. You can actually base off of what they call Bloom's taxonomy for educational objectives, which is what this pyramid sort of replicates here. Now, you're not tested on what Bloom's taxonomy is, but it's an educational theory. It's sort of the kind of predominant way that people in any kind of education or pedagogy think about what you want people to be able to do after you've taught them something. And the GMAT is an entrance exam for business school, for higher education, says over and over again it's a test of higher order thinking. Well, higher order thinking on Bloom's taxonomy begins at the second level of the pyramid here. The base of the pyramid is, anytime you teach someone something, you want them to be able to remember it and then hopefully understand it. And be honest with yourselves, I think I'm in this group too, many of us have passed tests on things we understood but didn't, or sorry, we remembered but didn't even really understand. You crammed it, those words and key concepts were in your mind, you were able to dump them back, process of elimination, but you didn't even quite understand it. Well, higher order thinking starts everything above understand. It's being able to apply information, analyze, create, all of those things. And so as you're studying for a test like this, most people are pretty good at going back and reviewing the associative property, the distributive property, exponent rules, past perfect tense versus simple perfect tense, all those kind of things. That's what we call the skill builder portion of all of our lessons. But we want to transcend and make sure we push people above that. And that's where we're going to spend a lot of our time today in this session. We want people to know when to use certain skills, what kind of symptoms would a problem have. If it's a clue that, you're going to need to factor this, or, ooh, here you're going to need to shun the first decision point and really get into the verb tense or something like that. And then above that is really think like the test maker, which is the theme here. How do they use your tendencies, your common mistakes against you? And so with that in mind, we want to show you a handful of questions that have common trap answers, see how you do on these questions, and then also show you how to avoid the trap and really get to think like the test maker. Think like who's writing this question. And I'll show you some of these I've written kind of based on what I've seen from other GMAT questions. And I'll show you how easy it is to write a trap answer that gets at least a third of test takers every time. So without further ado, let's attack a few questions. We've got one here that I think is pretty interesting. Often when I do this in our kind of brand new, just off-the-rack free seminars, I actually give people some of the triangle rules, but so to kind of prompt them. Beat the GMAT crowd, you guys have studied for a little bit, so I think you can attack this one from top down. I'm going to pause here for about 30 seconds, let everyone get familiar with the problem, and then we'll start talking through it together. I'll show you the worldwide statistics. How do people answer this one? And actually, sorry, this should be triangle XYZ. I did these slides this morning. Can't believe I'm missing that Z. So clarification, this is right triangle XYZ. That's why the Z point is in all of these. So I should proofread this. But take a second to get familiar with it, and then we'll talk about the worldwide statistics and what we can learn from this. So you're probably noticing here, other than that typo there, here is Pythagorean theorem. You may be thinking about the area of a right triangle. It's actually not that hard to calculate because in order to find the area, you need a base and a height that are perpendicular to each other. Well, in a right triangle, then there is that perpendicular, that 90-degree angle right there. And so a lot of times if you just use the two shorter sides of a right triangle, it's relatively convenient to be able to calculate area. You may also be thinking about special types of right triangles. The 3-4-5 triangle, the 5-12-13 triangle, maybe isosceles right triangles or 30-60-90 triangles. All those things may come to mind as you're looking at this. Well, let's see worldwide how people answer this one. And you'll see, actually, I thought I copied and pasted this directly. Worldwide, only about half, or about almost exactly half of people get this one right. And when they get it wrong, they almost always pick answer choice C. Right answer here highlighted in green is answer choice E. And what's interesting about this one is it shows you a couple things. One, a strategy that's really important to make sure you don't fall for the trap answer, as you saw a lot of people did here. And it just shows you how your mind works. And the way people tend to go through this question is they look at it and they go, ooh, 9 and 15, well, those are both multiples of 3. And if I divide the 3 out of each of these, this is 3 times 3, this is 5 times 3. I've been studying with my flashcards. I got a couple apps on my phone. When I'm between meetings at work or on the subway, I kind of play with that. I know 3-4-5 triangle. All right, GMAT, you think you got one over on me. This has to be a 3-4-5 triangle, so it has to be 9. The missing side is 12. Hypotenuse is 15, and so I'll just use these two sides, 1/2 base times height. I'll be able to calculate the area right away. But the problem in that is you're assuming if you go for that trap, as we see here, a lot of people do. Even some people kind of think, oh, if you give me one part of a 3-4-5, I can actually fill the whole rest of it in. What you're assuming is that the hypotenuse is 15. It could also be that these are the two short sides, and then the hypotenuse you'd find by using the Pythagorean theorem, 9 squared plus 15 squared equals this long side squared, and go from there. So what they're really testing here is this strategy we call play devil's advocate, which is if an answer seems obvious, especially if that answer is C, it's really common for a lot of us to just in your mind, you know you'll be rewarded for being able to give an answer. On this test, especially if C seems obvious, sometimes you need to play devil's advocate and say, okay, obviously there's a 3, 4, 5 triangle going on here, possibly. Is there anything else it could be? And this test will reward you for being able to play devil's advocate and say, well, not so fast. I know that there is such a thing as a 3, 4, 5 triangle, but it has to be that the 3 and the 4 are the short side and the 5 is the long side. If I don't know that the multiple of 5 is the long side, I can't do that. What I also find fascinating about this question, if you guys have seen any of our other statistically speaking seminar we did about 6 months ago, we used a similar question that dealt with what people assumed was an isosceles right triangle, and people make the same mistake. The stats are almost entirely the same as this. That one's actually a little more than half the people pick the trap answer and a little less get it right. What's fascinating about this one, and if we go all the way back, sorry to skip around these slides so much, all the way back to kind of this diagram here and the way we want people to think about the test, when people get a question like that wrong, they often go back to the skill builder level and say, ooh, I missed a triangle question on right triangle. And what I find fascinating with that is if you pick the trap answer here, it's not that you don't know triangles well. You picked it because you know the 3, 4, 5 ratio. You probably know the 5, 12, 13 and the 30, 60, 90 and 45, 45, 90. You know triangles really well. You didn't miss this question because you don't know triangles. You missed it because you trust your knowledge a little bit too much and you actually didn't think critically. And that's what higher order thinking is, and that's why we want to grandstand on that a little bit here. Higher order thinking is much more about critical thinking than it is about memorizing a bunch of rules. And so be careful when you get questions wrong. That's why we want people to have that phrase, think like the test maker, in their mind. Here, it's really easy to get people to a trap answer if you kind of let them feel proud of what they memorized. GMAT students and just kind of, academics in general, people that are looking for higher education, you've usually been rewarded in your life, like I said, not necessarily even understanding it, but remembering it. A lot of tests, you can just memorize your way, you see some common clues, and you spit back the answer and you get rewarded for it. Here, what they really want to reward is critical thinking, and so make sure you're thinking along those dimensions. That's how they get you. So that's one example of a strategy. And what we teach when we're talking to students about data sufficiency is really 2 strategies. One is play devil's advocate. We'll see the other one pop up in a question or two. But if an answer seems relatively easy, make sure. It doesn't mean you're wrong. Maybe it is an easy question, or maybe you're good at that. But it means that's an invitation to double check, spend that last 10 seconds. Hey, is there anything else it could be? Do negative numbers come into play? What about zeros? Is there any other type of triangle I could draw? Can I redraw this where one of these sides is the hypotenuse somehow? They reward you for that a lot. Here's another example of a data sufficiency question where some of that critical thinking may come into play. Again, I want to give everyone maybe 30 seconds or so to get comfortable with the question. I'll start talking through some of the parameters. Be honest with yourself what your answer would be, and then we'll talk and we'll see how the world answers this. We'll pay attention to whether there are any trap answers that we should be aware of, and then we'll talk about how we could avoid such a trap in the future. So here what we're dealing with, kind of review the parameters, and if you're still finishing up in your own mind, keep going. They want to know the value of integer z. Statement 1 gives us a little bit of a riddle about what z might be. I might draw your attention first. A lot of times people like to deal with the easy statement first. Does everybody agree statement 2 is worthless? They're asking us about z. This one just tells us y is not a prime number, some other number out there. And not a prime number. It could be anything. It could be a negative number. It could be 0. It could be a non-integer. Like 10 times infinite numbers of possibilities for this number they're not even asking us about. Then statement 1 at least talks about z a little bit. It's the remainder when positive integer y is divided by positive integer y minus 1. So we're dealing with two consecutive positive integers, one divided by the other, and z is the remainder. Now, you may have your own answer in mind. Let's see how the world answers this one. You can see we've got quite a few answers on this one, and to a pretty large degree, people don't get it right. Less than a quarter of people get this one right. A lot of people, just about exactly half of people, go for the same trap answer A, and then a lot of people, maybe it's a blind guess, maybe they're running out of time, whatever, pick E. And so I want to go back to statement 2. Statement 2 is absolutely worthless on its own. This one I think appears in our practice test, so a couple people may have been totally running out of time, blown in a guess here, so that's where that comes from. But outside of that, nobody really picks B, nobody picks D. It's obviously not sufficient. The way people tend to do this one is look at statement 1 and then say, okay, they're adjacent numbers, and they'll pick a couple of adjacent numbers. They'll say, okay, if it's 5 divided by 4, it's 1 remainder 1. If it's 8 divided by 7, it's 1 remainder 1. If it's 100 divided by 99, it's 1 remainder 1. And so people will look at those and just say, geez, it looks like it's always just 1 remainder 1. And that's where I invite you to go back and say, hey, wait a second, why would statement 2 be there the way it is? Part of this is playing devil's advocate. Is there any way to get something other than 1 remainder 1? Another part of it is a strategy we call with data sufficiency, why are you here? If one statement is obvious, either obviously not sufficient or obviously sufficient, there's got to be a reason it's there. And you can even see based on these stats here. If I'm writing a question like this, or better, if someone writing questions for the Graduate Management Admissions Council is writing this question, and they knowingly take B and D off the table, no one in their right mind would ever pick B and D here, then what they're basically doing is giving you a nice guesswork chance. If all you do is eliminate statement 2 and go, no way, then you've got a 1 out of 3 chance instead of a 1 out of 5 chance. They just made this question easy for you. So there has to be a reason they put it there. I've talked to the people at GMAT. They'll say nobody writes this question where one person asks the question and 2 individual people each write a statement, put it face down, slide it to the front. That the same person writes both statements and the questions then. So if they make one of these obvious, there's a reason it's there, and that's why you may want to consider, okay, I think I always get 1 remainder 1. Why would they say y is not a prime number? Let me think about types of prime numbers. One of those, kind of the unique prime number always is 2. If you use 2 and 1, then it's 2 with no remainder. And so your clues here are, 1, that statement 2 is so obviously not sufficient that you'd better consider a prime number. Hey, is there a prime number out there? They're kind of coaching you. They're giving you a clue to avoid that trap. The other one to think about is consider edge cases. Anytime they give you a range, if they say x is greater than 5, you better consider 5.1 or better 5.001. Don't just consider 6 or 10 or something like that. If they say that x is between -10 and 10, you may want to think about how would -10 work, how would 10 work, and then back it off a little bit to the middle. The GMAT on data sufficiency loves to play to the edge cases. And so if you just start in the middle of this range, they said positive integer y minus 1. That means the smallest that this can be is 1 in order to be positive. This one would have to be 2. You'd better consider that case. Even if you didn't, statement 2 gives you a clue by asking about or maybe it's a trap, but it gives you something you have to consider. When they say y is not a prime number, you'd better consider, okay, what kind of prime numbers have I not thought about when I was doing my assessment of statement 1? So again, the correct answer is C here. You can see from the stats, people go for A all the time, and when they do, they're missing 2 things. They're not playing devil's advocate by going to the edge cases. What's the smallest number I can use? What's the biggest number I can use? And they're not heeding the advice. Hey, wait a second. They defined y as not a prime number. So what about a prime number? Is there a prime number out there I should be thinking of? So test gave you a couple clues here. Not everybody takes them. And so if you want to be a great test taker, if you want higher scores than your competitors who all understand remainders and those kind of things well, pay attention to those clues, play devil's advocate, learn from the mistake that a lot of people make here. let's hit another data sufficiency question. And in this case, again, I want to give people an opportunity to get familiar with this. This one will take a little bit of a different angle than the last couple. Take about 30 seconds, get familiar with the parameters here. Then I'll kind of review what's going on and then be honest with yourself with your answer, and we'll see how the world answers this one. So here we talk about what's going on. We've got, they define xy doesn't equal 0. The product xy doesn't equal 0. You see that come up a lot when there are variables and denominators because it means neither of these can be 0 so that you have a valid mathematical expression. Here we don't really have any denominators, but still that definition there. They want to know the value of x. Again, here we've got that kind of familiar what we saw from the previous one, y equals 6. Worthless if we're considering x. So we may want to see how that factors in. And then statement 1 gives us sort of a quadratic, maybe with a little bit more, couple of variables in it. Yx squared plus 4xy plus 4y equals 0. So be honest with yourself how you might answer this one. And we'll see how the world answers this one. The world, more or less correctly, about half of people get this one right, a little bit less than half, but close to it, get A right. But if you look, there's a pretty common trap answer here that a lot of people pick, and that's C. And so that's where, be honest with yourself how you would have answered. That's where I want to spend a little bit of time talking about a strategy we call leverage assets. There's really two ways that you can go wrong with data sufficiency problems. One is you think you have enough information, but you don't. And that's sort of what we were going for before, that playing devil's advocate. Is it a special kind of triangle? Is there any kind of number, the low end, the high end, that would give me a different range? Or here, you think you don't have enough information when you really do. And if we go back to the graph, a lot of people didn't think they had enough information with statement 1 alone, but then when you get to both of them together, they thought they had it. Here's where, if you make that mistake, you don't think you have enough information when you really do, what you're not doing enough of is leveraging your assets. A lot of people blow right past this definition here, xy does not equal 0, and they go straight to what is the value of x, and they go, oh, there's two variables here, that's going to be a problem. I need to be able to get rid of one of these variables to do anything. But here's the difference. If xy doesn't equal 0, that means you can divide both sides by y here. And if you do that, then you end up with just kind of a common quadratic here. You can either factor it out or you can recognize this as one of those common equations, the x plus y squared equals, where you can, you can factor it out, or it's that common expression. So if we break it down here, we don't even really need 2 because whatever it is, whether y is 6, whether y is 1,000, whether y is -5, as long as it's not 0, you can divide both sides by y. And so the reward here is recognizing that you actually don't need it. Really what it is this asset here. It's kind of a hidden gem that if you went back and said, ooh, that's why I'm allowed to divide by both sides because they just defined it for me. Neither x nor y is 0, so okay, I can do that. A lot of people get past it because it is such window dressing on a lot of problems just to avoid having a denominator equal 0. Here it's actually pretty important. And this is, again, an example of the test maker's playbook. They know that you're in such a hurry to work with the statements, to get to factoring this out or to trying to solve for variables, that if they hide a small definition in the question stem, people don't tend to leverage what's in the question stem nearly enough. Other examples of this, if they give you a definition, but they don't give it to you, if they don't say x is an integer, but if they say x represents the number of books on a shelf, well, that means integer. It also means that it can't be negative, but a lot of times people are in such a hurry to do the math, they don't register that. They don't use it. So especially, again, if you get an answer a little bit too quickly, in less than a minute or so, you feel like, geez, it's got to be C here. that's when you want to go back and play one of two games. Play devil's advocate. Is there anything else this could be? What about the smallest possible number, the biggest, negative numbers, non-integers, 0, anything like that? Or go back and say, is there any information in this question anywhere that I didn't use? Hey, what this definition here, I didn't use that. What might that mean? Or, like we said in the previous question, if statement 2 is obvious, it's either, it could be statement 1 also, if the other statement is obvious, it's either a clue or it's a trap. So it's not always that, this is a clue I need like it was on the previous question. It just means you need to consider. This, they could have said y is anything. What they're really giving you is, do I need to know what y is or not? And so that's the game you have to play with yourself. On data sufficiency questions, the most important thing I can convey to people is that it's not just a clever way to ask a math question. It's not the delivery mechanism to ask you just about triangles, just about quadratics, anything like that. Sometimes it is. But often, especially when you're above that 600, 650 level and you're approaching really tough questions, it's the game itself. It's a logic puzzle. What they're really asking you for in these cases is, do you see the clue in statement 2? Are you asking yourself why it's there? Have you leveraged every asset in the problem? Did you let somebody throw a definition past you that you didn't catch? Are you considering the whole range of options from the smallest possible number to the biggest and all those kind of things? There are a lot of clues embedded in these questions, and the more you can kind of turn on your mind to that. Again, where I see the biggest danger when people get a question like this wrong is they go, I need to go study quadratics. Maybe, but if you pick C, it's a little bit less about the quadratic. If you pick E, maybe you didn't get it. Maybe you still got to here and thought, it's a quadratic, there's 2 solutions. So if you pick E, yeah, you need to go back and study quadratics. If you pick C, no, it's not the quadratics that got you down. It's the fact that you didn't heed the clues, that extra little nugget of information they put here, or when they put statement 2 here and kind of made it a nicely packaged, C is pretty easy to get to, did you consider, hey, does it really matter what Y is? They defined Y for me. Do I need them to do that? Or is there a way to get it done without that? So those are some of the things you want to think about when you're going through these problems. Again, a lot of this is learning by making mistakes. That quote at the beginning, you can learn a lot more from a few seconds of pain than a few hours of glory. You need to make some of these mistakes on your own. What we want to do in a situation like this, when we've got you for 45 minutes or so, is kind of turn you on to some of the most common traps that are out there and show you some strategies to avoid those. And what we've gone through with data sufficiency, we'll switch over to verbal in just a second, is show you that when people make mistakes on data sufficiency, when they fall for the trap answer, it's often because either they didn't play devil's advocate, they didn't think about other types of numbers, other types of triangles, other ways that you could position the same information, or they didn't leverage assets. And this is one that I harp on a lot with students. There's a clue here, and it's not highlighted in red on the test, but it's hiding in plain sight. There's another favorite question of mine. You can see, I think there are videos we have in the forums and things, where they're asking for the slope of a line, but there's a circle in the problem, and nobody uses the circle when they get the trap. And like 2/3 of the people do. And I always go back and I say, if the answer is what you think it is, why is the circle here? You know, if the answer is what you think it is, why is this here? If you never even considered, what if one of these is 0 or not, you're probably going for a trap. It's just, you need to at least consider, why is this clue here or trap here? Why is this definition here? And you know, the more perceptive you can be to those things, the better off you'll be. So we've done a lot of quant work thus far. I also want to make sure we cover a little bit of verbal, give that kind of fair time. And I was going through prepping these slides for today. A few of these problems I've done before. This one I think is new, a couple others that are new. And I was just kind of looking through our stat bank for what I think are some pretty cool trap answers. And this one here has some great traps to it. Sentence correction, I want to make sure everybody has a chance to get comfortable with this one. So I'm going to pause for about 1.5 minutes here. Hopefully it's not too much dead air for you. I want to give everybody a chance to run through this question here. Again, this is one of those where I tend to give people a little bit of traps where the first 10 words or so are underlined, but it's a longer sentence, and so I want to make sure everybody has a little bit of time to read through the whole thing. So take about 1.5 minutes. Log your, I don't say log your answers in a poll when I have our classes, but kind of jot your answer down or at least kind of mentally commit to it, and then I'll show you how the world answers this one and talk about how we can avoid some of those traps that the world falls into. All right, so I spent about a minute and a half, and apologize. It feels strange given so much dead air when you're presenting. But hopefully everybody's had a chance to read through it, get kind of comfortable with what we're having going on here, and want to then take a look now. If you have your own answer in mind, I want to show you first how the world answers this one, and then second, a strategy to avoid the trap type. This one, there's probably two kind of trap answers, not one glaring trap, but show you the mistake that a lot of people make, what they miss in these questions. It's actually really similar to what we just saw in the data sufficiency question, so that we can learn from the mistakes of others. And so if we take a look at what's going on here, A is correct, but if you look at the stats, significantly less than half of people pick it. Maybe a little more than a third, but somewhere around maybe 40% or so of people pick it. And the two most common trap answers, people really like D, and a lot of people like B. Right? So if we're looking at, actually not that much A than even D, if you kind of look at the sum of all the wrong answers, people get this wrong at a pretty good clip. And what they tend to be missing if they pick any of these answers is far away from the underline. That's where we come up with this tip here, the whole sentence matters. One of my favorite themes, this comes from our advanced verbal strategy lesson that we do a little bit late in our course. Once everybody's gotten comfortable with subject-verb agreement, pronouns, and verb tenses, and modifiers, and parallelism, and all those kind of things, one of my favorite themes, this is just a trick that you can see the test maker use over and over again to throw people off the scent of what the right answer is they hide something pretty far away from the underline. But it's something that is really, really important. And here what they do, they hide it by putting a modifier in here that is part of the underline, so you kind of forget that you can even cut out the entire modifier. What you really need at the beginning of a sentence is a subject that gets modified, because here's the verb. Whatever the subject is of a sentence will be this hallmark of the crisis or robo-signing or whatever the subject we use is, has led to a series of lawsuits. And the problem in the two most common trap answers that people pick, B and D, is that each of those already has a verb. And so because the subject has a verb, in order to add to a second one, you have to add the word and or but, some kind of a connector there to use two different verbs for the same subject. So what's fascinating about this one, people see the modifier and they try to correct the modifier or play around with what's being modified. Do I use a which clause? Do I not? What order does the hallmark or robo-signing and all those things go? What they're really missing is the test maker has turned this really into just a kind of a rudimentary sentence. Does every verb have a subject and vice versa? And they just hit it away from the modifier. So while people are playing around with the modifier and the order of words here, this is hanging out there. And so one of the things we want to train a lot of our students to do is recognize that there are common symptoms to this. When the first 10 or so words of the sentence are underlined, but there's more than twice as much sentence to go. Right? I mean, here you look at the first line is underlined, and there are 2.5 lines left. When they have a lot of sentence to go after they've hidden kind of the beginning of a sentence there is underlined, but more than half of it is not. They're hiding something. Not always, but usually they're hiding something. There's something outside the underline, whether it's a verb that you have to determine what's the subject of that verb and does it make sense, and then is it in the right tense? Or is it a pronoun that somehow controls the singular plural distinction you have to make up here? Or is it a word that signifies time, a word like since or from X to Y, or something that signifies a timeline that will control a verb tense up here somewhere? Or is it a word like and or but that's going to lead to some kind of parallelism? If you're struggling in the first dozen or so words, 10 to 12 words that are underlined, to even find a foothold for what's your decision, there's a pretty good chance that the whole sentence matters, and that if you scan the back half of the sentence for a verb, a word that connotes time, a word like and or but or something that ties together two clauses, you have to have those be parallel, or maybe a pronoun. Those are the four I tend to look for: verb, pronoun, linking word, or something that connotes time. If that's far away from the underline, a lot of times that controls something. And what they're hinging on here isn't all that dissimilar from what they did on that data sufficiency question we just did, where there they knew you were in a hurry. They knew that x times y is not equal to 0 is something that you might overlook and fly past because you're in a hurry. You want to get the answer quickly. Here, they know that in your mind, you're like, cool, the first 10 words are underlined, so I don't need to read most of the rest. The rest of it is just kind of crap. It's background information. I'm ready to go. They like to hide those things where you're just not looking for it. And so as you make these mistakes in practice, look for some of these clues. And again, it goes back to that hierarchy, that pyramid we went for before. A lot of people might miss a question like this and say, ooh, I need to go back and learn subject-verb agreement, or kind of the rudimentary sentence of subject, predicate, subject, verb, object. Like, I missed that. I forgot that there had to be a subject-verb thing there. What I want to train people to do, what we want to train people to do, is also see the symptoms that are at this think like the test maker level. Clues that are, hey, you know where they like to trap me? You know where they can always get me is if either the last 10 words are underlined, but it's a 40-word sentence, or the first 10 words are underlined, but it's a 40-word sentence. They like to hide something that's really important 15 to 20 words away from the underline. I need to be on the lookout for that. If I don't see an obvious decision, I need to go find that. Or in data sufficiency, hey, if there's a definition or a situation, if they gave a backstory and the backstory doesn't seem like it's important, I need to go and leverage assets. I need to go back and say, is there a reason that they said books on a shelf instead of gallons of water in a jug? Is there a reason that they said that XY doesn't equal 0? Or they like to get me to make assumptions. And so that's the kind of thing I need to slow down and say, just before I double check, what about the smallest possible number in the range and the biggest possible number in the range? Are negatives possible or not? Is 0 possible or not? Those are the kind of things that if you understand how they're creating trap answers, and hopefully that's what we're getting from a seminar like this. Statistically speaking, this isn't me telling you, hey, this is a cool tip or something you may need to look out for. This is me showing you people don't do this well. These are the traps that your competitors fall into. These are the traps that statistically you're predisposed to falling into. And a lot of those don't come from, I need to study triangles, I need to study quadratics, I need to study subject-verb agreement. They tend to come from, I need to pay attention. When I make mistakes, I need to pay attention to what did they do? How did they bait me toward the wrong answer? How did they hide the right answer from me? How did they sell me the wrong answer? And those are the kind of things that if you have that entire array, if you understand some of those traps, you also see them as opportunities of, ooh, first 10 words underlined, but a 40-some word sentence. I know where you're probably going. There's probably a word I should be looking for in the back half of the sentence. So before I pick my answer, I'm going to scan back and just make sure I don't see that. Or, ooh, C seems pretty easy on this one. I need to play devil's advocate. I bet there's another type of triangle that would work here or something like that. It's not just traps. It's also opportunities for those trying to score above 700. If you have that game in your arsenal, along with really comfortable skills with triangles, quadratics, subject-verb agreement with all those things, then you're a really complete test taker. And I've always kind of looked at people that I know do well, my students that have scored 700 plus, other instructors that I like working with and talking to about those things. Some of us do have some skill gaps. Every once in a while, be like, really, that's the rule? I didn't realize that, or something like that. But we more than make up for it by being able to play the game a little bit and kind of see where, ooh, this is the kind of question where they're likely to hide the right answer from me this way. So that's sort of the purpose of this session here. Obviously, you do need, especially if you're kind of a beginner at this, you do need to get comfortable with a lot of the grammatical rules and math formulas and those kind of things. But where people don't do enough study is kind of this middle part of the pyramid, which we didn't talk enough about today, but kind of recognizing clues. Right before this session, I was in our, we've got a kind of a dynamic homework question portal where we can upload videos to all of our homework questions, and students can ask follow-up questions. And what we mean by skills meet strategy is the key to solving a question was factoring it. And some student was like, well, I knew this was a factor question because they actually said factor at the top of the page. That was the section of the homework we were in, but how would I know that otherwise? We had to go through and say, if it's a product of 3 different numbers, you probably need to get those numbers on their own. That's when you should look to factor. Or if it's a heavy exponent question, that's when it's a good idea to see if you can factor out a composite base into prime bases. So that's what we mean here. And then the other big we definitely enjoy responding to those if we get a chance. Oh, sure. Yep, I was sorry about that. So I just got a message that having some a little bit of audio trouble. I was just kind of summarizing and even saying like it's one of the challenges with the one-to-many approach like this is I just do a ton of talking. So I wanted to pause and see. I know people were asking questions, and the BTG folks were going to send those over. So hopefully everyone was able to follow along pretty well. But if people did have questions, I think one of the most valuable components of all this is being able to answer those. So I'll if you guys have them to send over, excited to talk about them. Good question about integrated reasoning. We do have a ton of data. You know, we kind of collect that for all of our questions with the practice tests and all of those. I'd need to go through it. To be honest, I haven't sifted through it for too many. I'll make sure to get to that right away. Oh, sure. Sorry about that. You know, maybe sometimes that's like a cell phone interference thing, so I'm just throw that to the other side of the room. So the question was, do we have any data or common mistakes for integrated reasoning yet? We do have a mountain of data on all of that, and it's stuff that I honestly haven't gone through as thoroughly as I probably should just yet. So I'm going to put that on the agenda for the next time we do one of these statistically speaking seminars, and maybe for a blog post to come up, because I'm sure there are. And I'm sure other instructors have been playing around with those. So we'll attack that in the next one. Ooh, the next question is, can you tell us the other big thing again? And I'm not even sure what the first one was. Do you guys have clarification on that? The things that if there's the other, and this is kind of my problem-solving brain, right? When you kind of look at, if you see that in a reading comprehension situation or critical reasoning, if there's the other, that means there's one and one the other. So I'm trying to think of anything I divided into two. So for data sufficiency, really the two big strategies in my mind are, one, play devil's advocate. So if you get an easy answer, ask yourself, what about the smallest number in the range? Would that give me a different answer? What about the biggest number? What about prime number, something strange, negative, 0, non-integer. And then the other one, in terms of big strategy for data sufficiency that we covered, is leverage assets. Again, tends to be when you think you got an answer a little bit too easily, a minute or less or something like that, going back and saying, hey, is there any piece of information I didn't use? Is there a definition there? Is there something about the types of story problem they gave me that guarantees that it has to be an integer or something like that that I didn't use? It's leveraging assets that way. Good question. So this one is doing well in individual practice sets, even under time conditions, but not replicating it in full-length practice tests. And actually, I love the caveat, don't know why, because I know the content at this stage. So a couple of things that I think are important to note that, and I'll kind of hit that last point first. I'm not sure why this is happening because I know the content at this stage. Some of it is a lot of what we talked about today, that oftentimes what we saw in almost every question, I think every question we went through today, knowing the content just got you close enough to falling for the trap answer. And so I think sometimes just knowing common mistakes you make under pressure, whether it's timed pressure, whether it's because your mind's getting thrown in so many directions. When you're at question 30 of the quant section and you kind of know in the back of your mind you still have the verbal section to go, you become more susceptible to trap answers. And so that's one of the main keys and takeaways from today's session, is that just knowing the content cold isn't enough on a lot of hard problems. You have to have that presence of mind, that ability to double check what mistakes you might make and all those kind of things. So that's one, and I kind of mentioned, just because your question said, I know the content, but that tends to really be kind of a sales pitch for being able to think this way. Couple other things I'd mention. One, on verbal, one of the biggest challenges, and actually I'd say two of the biggest challenges, one is that your mind has already been thrown in so many directions. That quant section, most people use all hour and 15 minutes of that quant section, and it's grueling at times, especially because it's adaptive, and so you're not just seeing a straight set of questions, you're seeing questions that will challenge you at your ability level. And so by the time you get to the verbal, one, your mind is just worn out. The stamina is a big key. And two, it's just already been stretched in so many directions. I think focus becomes a little bit of a problem. It's not even just fatigue, it's focus, and then the verbal question will have you do a critical reasoning questions about a fake country's political election, and a sentence correction question about the migratory habits of penguins, and then a reading comp passage about some biological discovery, and so your mind's all over the place. So mental stamina is big. I think to help save yourself on the verbal section, doing a couple reading comp passages after you've studied math or something else, or at the end of a long day of work, to just kind of practice the way you're going to play is helpful. And then the other thing about practice tests being different, other than just stamina, but being different from the real thing, is that adaptive portion. You're constantly being challenged. So if you do a set of 25 questions from the official guide and you're trying to do it in 50 minutes to stay on 2 minutes per question, there are a lot of questions in that set that are a little bit beneath your ability level, probably. And so you get a chance to get a breather, whereas on good practice tests and on the real thing, you're being challenged the whole time. So that's, I think, a good sales pitch for do practice tests. Just that adaptivity is big. Or if you can use like the GMAT prep software, the question pack on that, and do sets of all hard problems, 10 of those at your desired pace, just to know that you're always being challenged. I think that's one of the other things that will get people. Okay, and then the big thing question was from the verbal portion. If I go back to, go back to verbal. Sorry about that. If I go to the, so kind of over here. The one big thing I wanted to get out here was the fact that the whole sentence matters, that it's easy for the creator of the test to get you to focus narrowly on what's underlined and what's immediately adjacent to it, and not see the entire sentence for what it is. So that's really the one big thing. I'm trying to think of the other big thing I would have hit, but the big thing. So I guess one, it's knowing subject-verb agreements and some of those rules, but the other one is being able to pay attention to clues and that kind of thing. So. Yeah, it's reading comp question. So the question is, I don't know if you guys can see all these, but I'll paraphrase them before answering. Do you have any suggestion for reading comprehension to get the gist of the paragraph quickly? Yes, and to me, it really all goes toward, this is one where I actually think a lot of test prep companies do reading comprehension pretty poorly. I'm tutoring a guy right now. This is the last, like his final frontier. He's hit 700 on a few practice tests, but when he doesn't, it's always reading comp. There's always one that takes him 10 minutes and just, he gets all, 3 of the 4 wrong. And it's because he's trying to get too much detail. And so I think what's important to know about getting the, even the gist of it quickly is understanding what gist you're trying to get. I think a lot of people do a lot of note taking, try to write down things that, they might forget. He's used a different test prep company first, and he's taking, it's almost like I look at his notes after he's done reading the passage, and he has as many notes as there are words in the passage. What I found, the gist you want isn't content driven, it's organization driven. So at the end of every paragraph, if you can basically in one sentence say to yourself, what's the paragraph about, why was it written? So in 2 to 3 words, is it about the new theory of whatever, immunological reactions? So the new theory problem with the old theory, I know it's paragraph 2. Okay, somebody said audio cut out a little bit. Sorry about that. Hopefully it wasn't like this the whole time. So that's about getting the gist of the reading comprehension paragraph. And the big picture to me is you want the right gist. You don't want a lot of detail because there are a lot of details and they'll only ask you about 2 or 3 of them. So what you really want is the organization of what's the purpose of that paragraph. Is it to introduce a theory? Is it to show some problems with the theory? Is it to propose a new theory? Is it to introduce a program? Is it to show why that program hasn't worked historically? Is it to give a suggestion for how to improve the program? Make the gist you're looking for more about the author's intent and less about the content. So look for structural language. Words like however, therefore, furthermore, also, first, second, third. You don't really need to know the content by the time you finish the passage. You just need to know where to go if they ask you about details. So I think the biggest key is read faster than you probably do, and know that if you do need to go back for real content things, you'll be able to go back. You'll spend more time, and not even if you need to go back. If they ask you a specific detail question, you have to go back because the answer choices will be pretty narrowly tailored. So you don't save yourself much question time by trying to remember details at the passage level because you're going to go back anyway. So you spend about 1.5 to 2 minutes on the passage itself. If all you know at the end of it is paragraph 1 introduces a theory, paragraph 2 shows problems with the theory, paragraph 3 proposes a new one, that works. Or paragraph 1 shows, introduces a new drug, paragraph 2 talks about some of the challenges with using it, paragraph 3 talks about some of the advantages. And if they ask you about one of the advantages, it's in 3. If they ask you about one of the problems, it's in 2, and you can always go back. So the key is more organization, less content. And I should say, just because I was just tutoring this with Thursday night with reading comp, it was amazing how much better my student, Ben, understood every passage when we got done reading it than I did. But I'd get every question right, and he'd go 50-50. And it was because he was so focused on getting every detail the first time out that he couldn't focus on questions, whereas I knew exactly where to go to get all the questions. So it's one of those things, the more I teach reading comprehension, the more I realize people are they're so worried about missing a detail or not getting everything they should that first read through that they spend too long reading, and then they kind of psych themselves out. They don't really get it. They miss the forest for the trees. They know a bunch of individual details, but they really don't have a good roadmap of what's where in the passage. So that first read through is much more about getting a little bit of a roadmap. So it looks like that's about all the time that we've got for questions and everything. So I want to thank everyone for attending. Thank you for your questions. Hopefully I answered those okay, and hopefully the audio problems weren't too big of a deal. again, I think the big things we want everyone to get away from, walk away from with this session is the knowledge that while understanding a lot of the content of the GMAT is important, it's not a content-based test. They say it's a higher order thinking test, which means it's not just about remembering and even understanding information. It's about being able to apply it, being able to analyze using it, and we call it the create level is really understanding how do they make these questions to get you. You can miss a triangle question, not just in spite of knowing all the triangle information, but in a lot of ways because you're so hell-bent on using your triangle information like we saw in that first question. A lot of it comes down to recognizing clues, data sufficiency, it's leveraging assets, and it's playing devil's advocate. On sentence correction, some of the game is scanning the entire sentence, even things way away from the underline. Like they used a 45-word sentence for a reason when a 20-word sentence would have done, partially because they can hide some information out there. So those are some of the individual strategies we covered today to help you understand the test maker's playbook a little bit. The other big thing is make sure you learn from your mistakes. And so when you get a question wrong, don't just go back and memorize or refresh the underlying content. That may be important, but it's also a matter of what did they use to bait me? What did I like about the trap answer, and what didn't I see about the right answer? And so really trying to get to this think like the test maker level. And then this one may be where the big thing comes from. The big takeaways too, think like the test maker. I don't want you to think that the entire test is just out to get you with trap answers. There's two components to it. There are trap answers, but then there are rewards for people who understand the test a little bit better. I tend to be a reward thinker. I don't think the test is out to get me. It's out to get someone. It's out to reward me because I'm looking for those clues. I'm playing the game. I understand the test, that it's not just a content test. It's also a higher order thinking reasoning test. And so I'm looking for those clues. So I think if I can leave you with that, don't think that it's just a trap. Also understand it's a reward system. They're rewarding you for thinking critically. Hopefully we showed you a few robust strategies for thinking critically, and even more so, hopefully we showed you how to analyze questions a little bit so that when you do make mistakes, and you will, you're well equipped to learn from them. So I think that'll conclude the session. Thanks everybody for all of your time, and look for us, like I mentioned, all these questions and more are in our question bank. So check the looks on VTG to get some practice and be able to learn from those mistakes, and we'll look forward to doing more of these sessions soon. So thanks everybody.